Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of Extra Serving, a Nation's Restaurant News podcast. I'm your host, Holly Petrie. This week, we're going to be talking about the future of in-house delivery. Amid rising minimum wage costs in California, two Pizza Hut franchisees have decided to lay off more than 1,200 people. This comes in the wake of California's minimum wage increasing to $16 at the beginning of 2024 and the upcoming $20 minimum wage that will take place April 1st. Will all delivery be third-party soon? Also, we're going to be talking about the company to go public this year, Pinstripes. It's the first of the year. The 15-unit chain was expected to go public last year after being acquired by Banyan Capital in June in a SPAC deal. With the anticipated public offering of Panera, will this year be filled with the company's rumored to go public, or will there be surprises in the mix? Finally, we're going to be talking about the rumor that Tropical Smoothie Cafe is up for sale. After a whirlwind and continuing drama that is the Subway sale, Tropical Smoothie Cafe is hoping to make its mark on the market with an anticipated $2 billion price tag. The news came on the heels of a rumor that Chuck E. Cheese is also exploring a sale. Will this year be a busy mergers and acquisitions year? Now let's turn it over to my co-hosts.
I'm Sam Okus, Editor-in-Chief of Nation's Restaurant News.
And I'm Leanne Zinsmeister, Managing Editor of Nation's Restaurant News.
Well, Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year.
Happy 2024.
New Year, new us.
Yes, we like to think so.
That's the goal.
Yep, we'll see how long we can keep it going.
I mean, I think we're already going to fall off the deep end in about 5 minutes, but we'll try.
We'll do our best. We're going to be buttoned up this time.
Oh, yeah.
2024 is all about professionalism.
All right. Let's not go that far.
No one believes him, don't worry.
Look, I just had this conversation with Applebee's CMO, Joel Yashinsky, and he said their marketing is all about the 90-10 rule, which is 90% in your wheelhouse, 10% you stretch a little bit. And I think we can apply that to everything, right? If we applied it to this podcast, 90% professionalism, 10%, who knows what happens.
I was wondering what you were going to say that 10% was.
10% absolute chaos.
Yeah. 10% Holly saying, I've never tried that major chain before.
No, that was my resolution for this year, is that I'm going to try 10 new chains.
Oh, that's good.
I love this.
Yeah, that's a good resolution. I like it.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to document it. I mean, if you don't document it and create content out of it, it
never
doesn't happen.
happens.
Yeah.
If
we're going to check it.
We could even have bonus extra serving podcast episodes, and it's Holly trying this new restaurant for the first time and weighing in on what she thinks about it.
Yeah.
So far on my list is Texas Roadhouse,
right?
IHOP.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so just to be clear, you've made the list already. You're not just like going to throughout the year be like, I never been there before, therefore I'm going to go there. But you have a targeted list already.
I have a few targeted areas, and I just always wanted to try Texas Roadhouse because I think, why not? And then
it's fun to see what peanuts on the floor looks like.
Yeah, I'm very curious about that. But IHOP, I'm like, I feel like I should go to an IHOP. Yeah. There's no reason behind it. I just feel like I should go to one.
I love an IHOP.
Here's the thing, Holly. These restaurants are Americana, right? Like they just ooze the American spirit. So you really haven't tapped into what it means to be an American until you have visited IHOP and Texas Roadhouse.
It's true. You're not a real American.
Right.
I should try Golden Corral too.
Yeah,
a good buffet in there.
It's an experience.
Have you been to any buffet? Did we decide this last episode you've been to no buffets? Is
no,
that right?
no, she's been to no buffet.
Like the hotel buffets.
Okay.
Didn't you like make your parents?
Yes,
take you to a buffet.
One real buffet in my life.
Okay.
And that buffet maybe just ruined you to the whole buffet experience.
No. My family doesn't like buffets. I think they're great.
Okay. Well, yes, you have to have a buffet as part of that experience.
I want you to visit a buffet, maybe Golden Corral, maybe a different one, and then see if it lives up to the memory that you created when you were like 6 or 7.
Well, that was Chinese, and it was really good.
Ooh. Okay.
Yeah, I'd also a little bit of everything.
I would also love for you to get like all dressed up like you did for that experience when you were a kid. Yes,
I always do.
Okay.
And just to reiterate, document with photos and video, please.
Exactly.
Holly, if I need to hire a professional videographer to follow you on this, do like a ball gown, like dress up in a ball gown and walk into a Golden Corral. We're going to put that on YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
Where I just taste test everything on the menu.
I mean, that sounds amazing. Honestly,
Please.
I'll dress in a ball gown if I can walk into a Golden Corral and try everything on the menu.
You heard it here first,
I'd love to
folks.
see that. That's a promise.
That's a promise. Somebody send me a ball gown and we will make it happen.
You could wear one of Mabel's.
Yeah, I could squeeze into my 7-year-old's gowns. I'll stitch them all together. How about that?
I mean, I think it'd be entertaining to see just like a little bit of a dress on your neck and then nowhere else. Because it'd fit over your head.
I will say, not to get off too much on a tangent before we talk about restaurant news, Mabel got her first makeup kit this year for Christmas. And I was one of the first subjects.
Yes.
And there are photos. So depending on how nice you guys are to me, perhaps you can see those. But and then I saw on Instagram, that is a thing. Like these dads were posting on Instagram photos of themselves, of their daughter's first makeup kit. That's kind of a thing. So, I mean, look, makeup washes off, so it's not a big deal. But photos exist. Incriminating photos, I guess you could say.
Noted.
Yeah.
And maybe if our listeners are lucky, we'll attach it to the show notes.
Fat chance, but we'll see. We'll see.
I don't know, you're dangling it out there. I feel like everyone needs to see this now.
I hereby retract my last 30 seconds.
Yeah, you can't do that.
Yeah. It's recorded. It's here forever.
True. It's just out there now.
Like most of our bloopers that I keep to myself.
If you have a blooper folder, I feel like that's content we could string together.
We should have done that in the 2023 bloopers.
Yeah,
at the end of the
annual blooper reel.
Yeah.
Well, and I also have several clips of Sam saying "you're right" to Leanne because she asks for those, and so I do have a folder of those too.
When Leanne's having a hard day, she just plays those back.
Sam, you don't know it yet, but my performance review this year, I have like receipts and listen, 87 times you said I was right.
I say you did something wrong. Huh, funny, because you say otherwise here.
You said I was right.
All right, guys, let's talk about restaurant news.
That was our 10%.
Yeah, it's over. It's over.
We've eaten up the 10%. We are done. All right, so one of the biggest stories of last year was the California minimum wage going up to $20 an hour in April. But the state also raised it to $16 to start the year off. In response to that, 2 of the largest Pizza Hut franchisees in California have laid off 1,200 delivery workers, of their in-house delivery workers. What does this portend for the future of delivery, in-house delivery?
It's hard to say because, there's pros and cons, of course, to having in-house delivery drivers. Until recently, until Domino's finally caved and started using third-party delivery, it was always a badge of honor for Domino's to have its own fleet of delivery drivers, mostly because, of course, the biggest part of all of that is control over that experience. And the thing most restaurant companies hate the most about third-party delivery is the control that goes out the door the moment they take your food to the customer and you're not controlling that experience. Of course, there's also the cut they take of every order. And so it's also not as profitable as having your own fleet. That said, every restaurant with its own delivery drivers also knows it's expensive to have delivery drivers because you're not just paying their wages. There's also the insurance and all the other things you have to cover. It's hard to recruit delivery drivers. I mean, I've been into multiple restaurants recently, delivery-oriented restaurants with the big sign in the window, delivery drivers needed. So the third-party delivery companies have become a much-needed answer to those challenges for the companies. But, bringing us to this, the wage increase in California and how this is a response to it, it does make sense because now you can outsource part of your labor and save money in the long run, even though you're giving up a cut of every cost that's being delivered because of what the third-party delivery takes. In the long run, you're still saving money. But it is at the risk of every single one of those orders being out of your control. Is this the future? It's hard to say because, so much of this industry is cyclical. And with something like this, I could see this being cyclical too, where 5 years down the road, everybody's complaining about quality of service and quality of off-premises orders and the amount of time it takes to deliver an order. And a Pizza Hut comes out and says, we're going to do in-house delivery. Like that is very much something I could see happening, just because the industry is cyclical, but also because, again, of the benefits of in-house delivery and what that could end up becoming down the road as a potential option. But I won't be surprised if we're going to get to see more of this out of California in particular. More franchises, more California-based companies saying, hey, we're outsourcing this in order to save money, because it's going to be a big challenge to have to increase your minimum wage and still maintain profitability without either outsourcing or just increasing your costs a lot, or increasing your price a lot. And we might see that too.
Yeah, I agree. I think that delivery trends have been going this way for a while. And a lot of this particular story makes me think that these franchisees have probably been thinking this way for a while, and this gave them an excuse, something to pin it on. It also, it's not news that franchisees and restaurant operators don't like this bill, don't like the minimum wage increase and other things about it. We've been talking about it for literal years on this podcast. And so here's an opportunity to make a business move that you were probably going to make anyway, and pin it to a piece of legislation that you don't like, and continue influencing public opinion that way. That's just a guess. I mean, the timing of it just feels like, because nobody knows exactly what the long-term impact of this bill will be, because it's been in effect for 4 days at this point, not even. And, our colleague Alicia Kelso pointed out yesterday that when things like this have happened in the past, she talked specifically about Obamacare and when that was implemented more than 10 years ago, and how really the long-term effect of that, businesses freaked out in the same way and said, we can't afford this, that we're going to have to lay people off. It's going to have such a negative impact on the industry. But the real long-term effect is that people had more money to spend. And one of the places they spend money is restaurants. And so, for all the money that you may lose here paying your employees a living wage, you could make it up from other restaurants' employees who now have more disposable income and can spend it at your restaurant. You know what I mean? It's one of those things that yes, it's tough at the beginning, but probably is all going to come out in the wash, in another 10 years, when hopefully everyone in America is making at least $20 an hour. We're all going to look back and be like, man, remember how the restaurants freaked out about this? Same way we look at, Obamacare, and however you feel politically about Obamacare, it did not take down the entire economy.
Yeah, it's a great point about sort of the optics of this stuff too, because I do think a lot of the companies like to make a big stink about it because they're trying to win over that public support in order to stop any further. Because let's face it, businesses in California want this to be a cluster. They want this to fail, because they would love nothing more than for it to be reversed if it was discovered that it's going to really tank the California economy. And you're right. I mean, we're 4 days into this. We don't know how it's going to go. It could yet tank the California's economy. Of course, like everything, it'll probably be somewhere in the middle, but that's probably what a lot of this is about. Now, this bill, I think, is most interesting from the perspective of will other states follow? And we've kind of talked about it before, but California is obviously extreme on the left and extreme on progressiveness when it comes to bills like this. And but there are a number of more progressive leaning states that tend to line up behind California and follow suit with similar legislation. And so we're just kind of waiting to see if that does happen. Will Illinois follow suit? Will New York follow suit? And if they do, this will become a bigger topic of conversation and will have implications for something like third-party delivery. Will more companies, start to outsource some of their talent? Now, a last point I'll make too is, somebody like, I believe Chipotle was one that came out. Chipotle, of course, based in California. They came out and said, oh, no, we're not going to, fire anybody. We're not going to get rid of any labor. We're going to increase our wages, no big deal. But Chipotle is not franchised, right? And so there's also a story here along the lines of, franchises versus corporate. Corporate might subsidize, this a little bit more easily than a franchise could. Of course, you have non-California based companies with franchises in California. And so a lot of questions being asked, and I think 2024 it will be very interesting to watch how do California restaurant businesses do after this legislation, because honestly, if we get to the end of the year and they did okay, they raised prices, people still came, to Leanne's point, more people have money in their pocket to eat at their restaurants. If it ends up being a good thing, you're going to see those other states line up to do the same thing in 2025.
Well, I mean, to Leanne's point, not only are restaurant workers getting the $20 an hour in April, it's going to force every other industry in California to move up to $20 an hour. So retail workers are going to be getting $20 an hour. And so it is going to be a lot more money in people's pockets to spend. And I know like Jack in the Box said at their last earnings call that they are going to have to raise prices in response to this. I really think that all these companies could stand to pay their workers more and still make a profit without putting the onus on the consumers. But I'm not in their finances. I don't know. But these are giant, like top 25 companies. Like they can make it work without throwing it back on the customer.
If it's corporate, right? I mean, that's, again, when it comes to like, if you have a mom and pop franchise, that's where there's just so much nuance here. And so that's why I think we're going to learn a little bit more about how this all falls at those levels: franchise, corporate, big business, smaller business, in the year ahead.
Well, I think if you're not subsidizing your franchisees, then you're doing something wrong.
That's a whole other podcast there, Holly. We can talk about the franchise model another day. Because you're not about to run out and pay for your franchise's labor costs. I mean, but there could be something. I mean, as part of your franchise agreement, it might become where the franchisor does have to start, coming up with more solutions to accommodate these higher wages. Or you're just going to see more of these franchisors developing automation to help their franchisees have solutions to get around it, right? So it will be a big thing in the franchising industry to come up with some solutions to the labor costs.
Well, and a lot of brands, in the wake of the huge labor crisis that we had 2 years ago at this point, a lot of them raised wages. So for some of these brands, it's not that big of a jump than it would have been 5 years ago. It's really increased because they had to pay more to get workers. And so they had to give more benefits and they had to do all these things. And so I think that it's not as big of a leap as some of these brands are making it out to be. But some people just love the drama.
Some people do love drama. Yes.
Yeah.
Guess that's
that
where
also
we've landed.
means that, like, obviously they're giving the raises to their current employees, but it means that in the next wave of hiring, because we all know that employment in this industry ebbs and flows, like they could end up with higher quality workers now because they're paying more. People who might have defaulted to a different industry just because it paid more, like, might consider restaurant work now. So lots of factors
and
here.
I think, and we've talked about it on the podcast too. I mean, it bears reiterating, you should be trying to pay your employees more, and because it does have long-term benefits. And if you look at a lot of the best players in hiring, recruitment, and retention, it starts with better pay. So like, I don't know that many people would disagree with that, but of course it's when you legislate that higher pay. And the other thing too, we haven't really gotten into, but when you raise the low bar for everybody, your higher bar has to be higher, right? Because if it's minimum wage of $22, so McDonald's is paying $22, Chick-fil-A has to pay $25, right? Like, there's a lot of that going on. But suffice it to say, I think we can all agree you should be paying better. If you're not in California, you should pay better, even though it's not legislated, partly because it could be legislated someday, but also because you're just going to attract better talent if you do.
Really.
I think everyone should be paid more. Wink, wink.
Right. Yeah, nice try, Holly.
I definitely pay you more than $20 an hour.
just
anyway, let's move on.
All right, so let's talk about the first company to go public this year, Pinstripes. They only have 15 units. It reminds me of some of the companies that went public last year, but it's an entertainment brand, which is an interesting thing. But they also were supposed to go public last year. They got that SPAC deal in June. And then there was, I don't know what the issue was, probably a bunch of legal stuff. And then they went public on January 2nd. They're going to ring the bell on the 19th. So do you guys think that this is going to be a big year for people going public? I mean, we have Panera that's been rumored for a long time, but it really seems like they're getting their act together. I mean, do you think this is going to be a big year for IPOs? We had kind of a quiet one last year.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've been saying for a while that 2024 would be a busy IPO year. And I feel like Pinstripes going public on January 2nd was just like indicative of like, all right, buckle up, here we go. They did initially say in June that they would go public by the end of 2023. They made a bunch of changes to their C-suite around October, I think. So it really strikes me as like less of a problem thing and more of just like they took their time and were really deliberate about it. Yeah, I mean, I hope they're successful. I'm not really familiar with Pinstripes beyond what we've reported. I've never been to one. Perhaps something to add to my own list, visit a Pinstripes. But I do think it's just the first of what will probably be many, many, many. At the end of last year, I was going to write like a roundup analysis of all the IPO activity in 2023. And then I could not come up with enough news stories we had written, even just including things about like so-and-so might go public. There's just like, there was very little. I think we wrote maybe 7 stories about IPOs in any sense. And like one of them was like Fogo might go public, but then they were acquired by a private equity firm. So like opposite of that. But I do remember finding that Pinstripe story from June and thinking, that's interesting. I wonder if they're still working on this. And so when Ron said on January 2nd that Pinstripes had gone public, I was like, okay, that's not a surprise. So it does feel very much like a buckle up, get ready. Like this is what the industry is doing this year.
Yeah, I guess 2 things. I mean, the first thing is, to see the continued success of the entertainment category. I've been curious to see what would happen with that because on one hand, it does sort of smack of just very trendy of the moment kind of a category. Would this really have legs for the future? Of course, coming out of 2022, and there was a real hunger for experiences. It seemed like that it really fit the moment. And I was a little cautious of the category just because it just struck me as, we're going to run out of white space, so to speak, for these things a lot faster than your typical category because A, they have these giant footprints, and B, there's only so many unique experiences like a bowling alley or dart throwing or pickleball that you can put into one community before it's saturated. So I guess it's interesting to see. I mean, this does seem to be indicative of, just continued growth. Now, that's not across the board, right? I mean, not every entertainment category is going to take off. Something like bowling is a fairly low-hanging fruit when it comes to entertainment. Pickleball will be the one I'll be most curious to watch because that is as 2023 as it comes, right? So, like, can that continue into the future? We'll see. But suffice to say, there's some longevity here. Let's see in 2024 how that goes. Second part, though, is just the financial markets in general in 2024, because in 2023 and before, a lot of investors were on the sidelines. There wasn't a lot of appetite for investment because of course, the interest rate being so sky high, and just a lot of uncertainty around the economy in general. I mean, we've been saying we're going to go into a recession now for 3 years. That appears likely to not be the case anymore. The interest rate has plateaued likely. The Fed has indicated that they're going to lower the interest rate this year. So that would suggest that the financial markets will open up a little bit. There could be more private equity deals this year. There could be more personal investment at the emerging brand level. There could be more opportunity just for smaller loans and things like that. Of course, you have your small business loans that you could pursue, but IPOs being, one route that you could pursue. I guess all to say, with the financial markets in general loosening in 2024, that would indicate that more brands would pursue the IPO route as well. So I think that alone would suggest to us that you should expect more brands to go public this year. But it's really hard to say. I don't know. Public brands are such a funny thing because it's like, I think at its most I think we maybe have seen 25 brands go public in a year at its height. If I'm remembering correctly, a couple years ago, it was just like IPO Palooza. In the grand scheme of things, it's not a ton. And then it's always funny because then you watch the brands come off the market, after a couple years. I mean, Panera, make up your mind. So that's a very, I don't know if niche is the right word, but the public markets are not for everybody, right? But it is at least, I guess, a barometer of the general financial markets and restaurant investment. And then the more brands choosing the IPO route can be a barometer that, the restaurant financial market in general is healthy.
Well, according to some experts, we have Taylor Swift to thank for the economy.
Okay, Holly, I'll bite. Why?
No, because her tour has sold, it's made so much money that a lot of financial.
So it's trickling down.
I'm quoting them. I did not make this up. To appease Leanne, who's a big Taylor Swift fan, I did not make this up.
Listen, no, I know you didn't make it up because I've read it too. But as a Swiftie who probably spent close to $1,000 on Taylor Swift last year across the board, I think that's silly. I don't know, because you know what? If not Taylor Swift, I still would have spent that $1,000. I don't know on what, but
I'm so glad this has become a personal finances podcast. But yes, I mean, I was going to say, if not Taylor Swift, there are other events, that fill the void, right? Whether that's Beyonce or whatever. But I mean, point taken that, if a Taylor Swift concert generates millions of dollars for a local economy, not just because of the ticket sales, but because of the restaurant you go to before you go to the Taylor Swift concert. So, okay, I can see it. But most concerts are super expensive these days. So let's just say Taylor Swift is not the messiah we should all make her out to be. She's just another good act that people are attracted to go see and put some money into a local economy.
Well, so my point after that was going to be that, we saw Kava's giant IPO last year when the economy was not as good. And so, I mean, what does that mean for the future of the Panera IPO, which we're expecting to be giant? Is that going to explode even more because the economy will be in a better place? Those are the kind of things I'm thinking about, because if Kava is any example of what's going on in the industry, I think we can expect some crazy numbers from the brands that go public this year in a better financial market.
Kava's also part of the reason Kava did so well, though, is because this is a brand on the rise, right? I mean, this is a brand that is still not even close to saturating the market. It's got a ton of white space ahead of it. And Panera is not in that position. Panera is in most, if not all states, pretty much everywhere has a Panera at this point. Sure, it will continue to grow, but, an IPO, Kava it's as much a bet in its future as it is in its present. And so Kava, I would suggest, has a brighter future than Panera, simply because it's got a longer runway. You know what I mean? So anyway, but Panera, purely because of the size of Panera, that's a safe bet, I guess you could say. Panera is a safe bet. Kava's a bet with a bigger potential payoff. And I think so Panera, yes, it'll be a big IPO, but it will be in line with, I think, with what you'll see with a lot of mature restaurants compared with what Kava did. Kava's was more in line with what Sweetgreen did. In that Sweetgreen had a huge IPO because of the bet on its future, which arguably has not totally, paid off. But, still could yet pay off in the future.
I mean, what brands do you guys think would be exciting to go public this year? Like, the first one that comes to mind for me is like if Big Chicken went public. Like, I think that would be massive. Or like a Nashville hot chicken brand. Like, I think one of those could do a really banger job on an IPO. What are you guys thinking in terms of like, what could you see?
Well, if we look at the most exciting brands out there today, I mean, Crumble is entirely franchised, which is not to say it couldn't do an IPO, but it doesn't need an IPO. And another fast grower on the top of my head is, I just had it. Dave's Hot Chicken. That was what I was looking for. Dave's Hot Chicken, because related to what you were saying. I mean, these are some of the more exciting brands out there. So could be seen to capitalize on the interest. But again, if you're a heavily franchised brand, I mean, if you don't need to file an IPO, why would you, right? If you don't need that financing from the public markets, but because you're franchised and there's a lot of interest in franchising, you're not going to do it. That's why restaurants in general do not have as many, do not go to the public market as much as other industries, is because franchising is so healthy for this industry. So I don't know. I'd have to think about that one. Leanne, you got anybody?
I don't know a lot about their business model, but my first thought was Dig. It was the fastest growing emerging chain last year. Now, a lot of that is because of units they had closed during the pandemic, but they're, back on track now. They're very, very, very heavily focused on New York City. So if they ever wanted to expand beyond the city, head to the other coast, move inland, like that could be, it's a brand that like could have a lot of runway if it wants it. But again, I don't know like what their long-term plans are, or how they plan to get there, but that's one that would be exciting. And then of course, my other first thought was like, it's always exciting for us when the big brands go public. Like I remember when we first got wind that Subway was considering a sale like a year ago this week. And one of the things was like, do you think somebody would take Subway public? Like, not that Subway has any runway in front of it. In fact, quite the opposite, but it would be exciting and we would talk about it a lot. So, my brain went, Panda Express or, whatever other like big private restaurant companies we've still got would at least be fun to talk about.
Well, I think that's the point of an IPO. I don't know if like it gives you so much attention. Like we're talking about Pinstripes. We weren't talking about it before. Like there's something to be said for an IPO that you're bringing attention to a brand that you may not have attention otherwise. Like you want to show that you're out in the market, you're growing, like we're here. And I think that there's like a publicity point to going public too.
It's a pretty risky marketing campaign, though, at the same time. So hopefully you're not just doing it for publicity.
I think it can be a nice benefit, but it's not a reason to go public. My sister recently, quote unquote, discovered Kava when she was visiting a friend in North Carolina and then realized that one had just opened near her in Austin. And she was telling me about it and I was like, oh yeah, they like went public recently. It went really well. And my sister was like, what are you talking about? And so the average like American has no idea what's happening on the IPO market. You know what I mean? So it is a wonderful benefit. And like indirectly, yes, the IPO did cause the buzz that caused my sister to start going to Kava all the time. But it's not a reason to go public.
Well, let's talk about another big brand that's going to make a splash next year or may make a splash next year. It's still TBD. But Tropical Smoothie Cafe, which is one of the fastest growing chains in the US, is considering a sale. The price tag is rumored to be $2 billion, which is a substantial amount of money for a restaurant sale. So, I mean, we were talking about this with Subway last year, like who was going to buy Subway? It was supposed to be like $9 billion. $2 billion is a little bit more reasonable, but we are almost definitely going to go to private equity if it gets sold. I mean, like this brand has been growing at a fast clip for years. It's been one of the fastest growers for a long time, as opposed to the other brand that's rumored to go public, Chuck E. Cheese, which is the opposite. They're looking for a turnaround. Tropical Smoothie Cafe is looking just to boost where they're going. So What do you guys think about the potentials for sales this year? Like, do you think that we're going to see a big mergers and acquisitions year? Are we going to see Tropical Smoothie Cafe get sold for $2 billion? What's really going on?
Yeah, I mean, similar to what I was saying about the financial markets, right? That the appetite to invest in the industry will determine all of this, and the signs seem to point to there being more hunger for that investment because of the rates coming down and things like that. But as it relates to Tropical Smoothie Cafe in particular, um, this is a brand that's been on a tear for a few years, maybe more than a few years. And it's for a number of reasons. I mean, for starters, it's got great leadership in CEO Charles Watson. It is a franchise brand and it occupies a very unique corner of the industry in that as a smoothie chain, there's a couple other fairly sizable competitors out there, yes. But when it comes to like franchising, you don't have a whole lot of options in the smoothie category. And so they've found robust interest on the franchising side of things. And so that has helped them grow very quickly. But, going back to sort of that uniqueness in the marketplace as a, treat concept, let's call it snack treat concept is how I guess we would designate it, even though it does have, some food options but, its core menu item being the smoothie. It very much occupies this place where it is a lifestyle brand, I guess you could say, to a T. I don't love that label, but it describes so much of what restaurants are striving for, which is to be a regular part of a customer's routine. And smoothies, especially for those who are, pursuing healthier lifestyles, or just, needing a snack or filling a day part, smoothies are just such a great option, and fill a need in a unique way that so many other snack treat concepts cannot. Which means that Tropical Smoothie still has so much runway ahead of it. And not to spoil anything too much, but to hint at something, we've got something coming out in a couple of weeks that Tropical Smoothie Cafe performs very well on. Let me just say that Tropical Smoothie Cafe is beloved by a lot of consumers. And it's because of what I was just saying, which is like so many consumers count it as one of their favorite brands because, either on their way to work or on their way to the gym, on their way to pick up kids, whatever it is, they're swinging in for that smoothie. And it is a reliable destination for that part of their life. And therefore, they reward Tropical Smoothie Cafe with their loyalty and by, treating it as one of their favorite brands. And, once a brand like that can embed its way into your lifestyle, of course, it's going to perform very well. So kind of rambling, but I think what I'm trying to get at is you're going to see deals for brands like that, which are, call it recession proof, call it competitor proof, the 800-pound gorilla in the category. It should dictate a high price point because it's not going to fade away. It's only going to grow. And if consumers love it, franchisees love it, then it's just as safe a bet as they come. So that's why I just think Tropical Smoothie Cafe, which by the way has blown past, 1,000 locations. It's blown past, I believe, $1 billion in sales, if I'm remembering correctly. And so all of its financials show that it's really on an incredible trajectory. So I'm sure a lot of suitors are going to line up to pay for it.
Yeah, I do think overall this year we'll probably see more transactions among the bigger chains. In 2023, we had just over 20 M&A deals, I believe. And most of them were smaller emerging brands. Now, obviously, we had the Subway deal kind of anchoring the M&A news, and it doesn't get bigger than that. But other than Subway, I mean, there was like Pollo Tropical, Smoky Bones, but most of the deals were with emerging brands under 20 units. And that's great. It was still a very exciting year for mergers and acquisitions, but I do think that this year we're going to see more. I mean, we're already talking about Tropical Smoothie Cafe, Chuck E. Cheese. I wouldn't be surprised if we see more deals among the top, say, 100 chains, along with those deals for the smaller emerging ones, but I think a lot of the bigger chains are thinking about what their next big move is for the first time in several years. I mean, we say this a lot, but there was so much time spent in survival mode. And chains really started coming out of that last year, but now they can think about, okay, we're back on our feet. We have an idea of what we want our future to look like. Now, how are we going to get there? And that's why I think we're going to see more IPOs and more deals among these bigger chains, in addition to the smaller ones that we've already started to see more of over the last couple of years.
To build on what Sam was saying earlier, Alicia Kelso wrote this great piece that, snack companies are just on the rise because consumers want more of them. It's increased like a percentage point over the past year that consumers are like, they're going to these snack concepts. They're craving them. They want to be there. And it's benefiting brands like Tropical Smoothie because this segment is rising, that people want these midday snacks. We've been talking about it for a while, how day parts are shifting. And this midday section is building faster than anything else. Like you think about Dutch Bros, that's a middle of the day section. And so we're looking at brands like Tropical Smoothie that are really filling that hole for a lot of guests, and it's working. People are really looking for that day part.
And from a discretionary income standpoint, with prices going so high, inflation being such an issue, consumers pulling back on their restaurant spending a bit. The data is kind of all over the place because it seems like at the end of the year in 23, traffic did start to kind of gain some momentum. But by and large, 2023 traffic was a real issue because of inflation. Consumers are really pulling back. Snacking, can be a little bit safe from that because of the price point being modest. Now I don't have any data to show how much the snack category itself increased prices, but if they did much, they're still coming from a very low price point. So snacking still remains a value-oriented category. And in this day and age, that means something. So yeah, people are looking for that afternoon snack or mid-morning snack. They're looking for a value play, and they're looking for something tasty and unique. And a lot of these, especially like the smoothie chains or coffee chains that are doing a lot with menu innovation, can provide that.
I mean, look at Cosmix. If McDonald's is seizing on the day part, it's really growing if they want to invest in it. So, I mean, I think that's the biggest sign that snacking is here to stay. And I think that's really going to bode well for Tropical Smoothie Cafe.
Sure.
Imitation, the sincerest form of flattery, as they say.
As they say.
As they say.
I'm going to thank my lovely co-host for joining me today.
Sally.
Thanks, Holly.